ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवंश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे राम हरे हरे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Hare Krishna. Welcome back to the 67th session of Śrimad Bhagavad Gītā. We are studying chapter 9, and today is the third class on chapter 9. We will start from verse number 11. So, this is a new section that we are going to start. A quick recap from verse number 1 to 3, that is, these three verses. There we see the glorification of the subject matter of the chapter and the qualification and disqualification of hearing Krishna Katha. Mainly we discussed on this. And in the verses 4 to 10, we discussed about Krishna's, or we studied about Krishna's inconceivable relation with this material world. And now, in verses 11 to 19, we will study about what Bhagavan says about the worshippers and non-worshippers, or the believers and the non-believers. So in verse number 11 and 12, we see Bhagavan describes about the foolish people who do not believe in the existence of God. Or in other words, who do not believe that Krishna is the Supreme Personality or of Godhead. And in verses 13 and 14, the great God-realized, surrendered souls, their qualities, their activities will be described. So let's start from verse number 11. Avajananti mam modha manushim tanumashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Since the morning, the Zoom is troubling today. So again, the screen is not responding. Please wait for a while. Avajananti, the right, mam, me, mudhaha, foolish men, manushim, in a human form, tanum, a body, ashritam, assuming, param, transcendental, bhavam, nature, ajanantaha, not knowing, mama, my, bhuta, of everything that be, maha ishwaram, the supreme proprietor. Translation. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. Let us recite the next verse also, that is verse number 12, and then we will discuss. मोघाशा मोघ कर्माणो मोघ ज्ञान विचेतसः राक्षसी मासुरीं चैव प्रकृतिं मोहिनीं श्रिताः. Synonyms: Mogha ashaha, baffled in their hopes. Mogha karmanaha, baffled in fruitive activities. Mogha jnanaha, baffled in knowledge. Vichetasaha, bewildered. Rakshasim, demonic. Asurim, atheistic. Cha, and. Eva, certainly. Prakritim, nature. Mohinim, bewildering. Shritaha, taking shelter of. Translation: those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So we see From verse number 11, we see in these two verses, Bhagavan says about the qualities and activities of the fools. Right? So we see the mudhaha, that is the foolish men. So first I would like to read a portion from this purport given by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada in for verse number 11. So purport. From the other explanations of the previous verses in this chapter, it is clear that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, although appearing like a human being, is not a common man. The personality of Godhead, who conducts the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the complete cosmic manifestation, cannot be a human being. Yet there are many foolish men who consider Krishna to be merely a powerful man and nothing more. Actually, he is the original Supreme Personality, as is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. Ishvaraha ParamāKṛṣṇakāntā. He is the Supreme Lord. Then this portion. Material bodies cannot perform the wonderful acts described in previous verses. His body is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. Although he is not a common man, the foolish deride him and consider him to be a man. His body is called here Manushim because he is acting just like a man, a friend of Arjuna's, a politician involved in the battle of Kurukshetra. In so many ways, he is acting just like an ordinary man, but actually his body is Satchidananda Vigraha, eternal bliss and knowledge absolute. This is confirmed in the Vedic language also. Satchidananda Rupaya Krishnaya, I offer my obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is the eternal, blissful form of knowledge. From Gopalatapani Upanishad 1.1. There are other descriptions in the Vedic language also. Tamekam Govindam, you are Govinda, the pleasure of the senses and the cows. Satchidananda Vigraham, and your form is transcendental, full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. Gopalatapani Upanishad 1.35. So we describe while talking about the verses in the previous class, that is the inconceivable relationship of Krishna with this material world. And we described this in chapter 7 also. We studied that how all the spiritual and material things are the different energies of the Lord. And we see, just as here it is mentioned in the purport, that he who creates, maintains, and annihilates this entire creation, he cannot be an ordinary human being, though he looks like so. So we see that as we discussed previously also, Bhagavan says in 7.24 that Avyaktam Vyaktimapanyam Mannante Mam Abuddhayaha. So who thinks that I was unmanifested before and now have become manifested, they are Alpa Buddhayaha. They are having very limited intelligence. And in this connection, there is another reference here in this purport. I would like to read that also. There are many controversies between the impersonalists and the personalists about the Lord's appearance as a human being. But if we consult Bhagavad Gita and Śrimad Bhagavatam, the authoritative texts for understanding the science of Krishna, then we can understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is not an ordinary man, although he appeared on this earth as an ordinary human. In the Śrimad Bhagavatam, first canto, first chapter, when the sages headed by Shaunaka inquired about the activities of Krishna, they said, Krutavan kila karmani saharamena keshavaha atimartyani bhagavan gudha kapata manushaha. Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with Balarama, played like a human being, and so masked he performed many superhuman acts. Śrimad Bhagavatam 1.1.20. So in the first canto of Śrimad Bhagavatam, in the first chapter, verse number 20, we see when the sages of Naimisharanya, headed by Shaunaka Rishi, were inquiring about the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, to Sutta Goswami. So here Atimartyani, that is the superhuman activities, and Gudha kapata manushaha is very important. So he masked himself and played like a human being along with Balarama, Saharamena, Keshavaha. Keshavaha is Krishna and Saharamena means here along with Balarama. So Kritavan Kila Karmani, all the activities that he did. So actually, the Lord's appearance as a man bewilders the ordinary people. There is no doubt about it. And that is why Bhagavan said, Mama Maya Duratyaya. Because it is Anaham Prakashaha Sarvashaha. He said that, yes, I don't express myself completely to everyone. And that is why we see this confidential knowledge. As we see in the beginning, to understand this Vidya, the prerequisites are, the most important prerequisites are Shraddha and non-enviousness. So complete faith and non-enviousness. So a person who has sufficient faith on the words of the Lord, he can only understand what Bhagavan is, because in the scripture Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan himself has taken the responsibility to express himself in full. And we see here Bhagavan is not hiding anything about his godhood, his creation, everything, every nuances of his creation and about himself. He is expressing everything. And the use of first person, that is Uttama Purushaha, here we see repeatedly he is not using the words like, sometimes yes, it is, he is using this as Ishvaraha or in indirect terms, but in most of the places we see he is directly saying I, mine, all this. Mama Maya Duratyaya Avajananti Mam Mudha Manushim Tanumashrita, and Mayadhyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam, and Maya Tatamidam Sarvam Jagadabhyakta Murtina So everything, he is not saying that he'll see Arjuna, there is the supreme person who is pervading all this. So the energy is coming from him. He is not saying that. He is directly saying it is me. It is my energy. Maya tatam idam sarvam jagad avyakta murtina. It is my unmanifested form or my impersonal form by which all the creation is pervaded. So everything he is describing in Bhagavad Gita itself, and there we see the use of Uttama Purusha in most of the places. So here he himself is expressing the confidentiality of his existence, the confidentiality of his supremacy, and the confidentiality of how to reach him. Everything he is expressing here. And we see if we study these two verses very attentively, we actually get some points about these mudhas, that is, their qualities and activities. So first point is, they don't worship the Supreme Lord. There is no question, because they don't have sufficient faith in the Godhood of Lord. That is why it is not possible. And this is the next point. Who don't understand the supreme Godhood of Krishna, instead consider him as an ordinary human being with some special prowess. That is, avajananti mam modha manushim tanumashritam. And param bhava majananto. So they don't understand the transcendental nature of the Lord. And they are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. And the last point, they take shelter of bewildering material nature. That is in verse number 12. Prakritim mohinim shritaha. So they take shelter of the bewildering nature, prakriti. And we see that in Bhagavatam also, it is described where in the Krishna Lila, that is in Canto 10, in the 3rd chapter, that is the birth of Sri Krishna. There we see how Bhagavan first appears with 4 hands in the jail cell of Devaki and Vasudeva. So he appeared like that, and on the request of his parents, he then changed his form to an ordinary child. That is, Babhuva Prakrita Shishuhu. So then he changed himself in a form like an ordinary human being, ordinary human child. And we see in this scripture, that is Bhagavad Gita, in 11th chapter, that is Vishwarupa Darshana Yogaha, there when Bhagavan showed his Vishwarupa and even the destructive form, the Kala Rupa, that is Kalosmi Vyavasayosmi. So after that, Arjuna was actually Bhita Pranamya. He was very afraid, very, very, very scared after seeing Krishna in that. So he then said, he requested the Lord to show the 4-armed form which he worshipped. Tenaiva rupena chaturbhujena. And that is 11.46. And in 11.51 we see Manushim Rupam. So the Manushim Rupam, when he changed the form to his original Manushim Rupam, then Arjuna actually became completely pacified and regained the peace of mind. So everything that the personal form of Krishna, as we discussed in our previous class also, that is Avyaktam and Vyaktam. So that Avyakta Rupa, by his Avyakta Rupa, he is all pervaded. And by his Vyakta Rupa, he is always present in Goloka Vrindavana. But by his sweet will, and also for Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chadushkrita, apparently he comes down to this material world in his original form. And that is why his, as we discussed, his body, his mind, his senses, they are all spiritual. It is not like ours. We are spiritual. Our soul, definitely the soul is spiritual. It is nothing, no material content is there in the Atma itself. But we are working through the material mind and material body. But for Krishna, it is not like that. Though apparently it seems that it is a human-like body, but actually his body, mind, everything is spiritual. It is a transcendental form. That is why it is said as Nirakara or Nirguna. It does not mean that Nirguna means without form. No, it is without material form. That means it is a spiritual form. Attributeless means it is with the transcendental attributes, not that completely devoid of any attribute. It is transcendental attributes. So that is why, and it is not possible to understand for everybody, specifically who don't have sufficient Shraddha in his heart. He will not be able to understand this. And that is why Bhagavan says that then what happens to these mudha, that is, who don't believe in the godhood of Krishna. And as a result, they take shelter of bewildering material nature. They are attracted by demonic and atheistic views, and they do not worship the Lord. What happens to them? It is said that their destiny is failure in liberation, failure in fruitive activities, failure in acquiring culture of knowledge, failure on the whole. Moghasha, mogha karmana, mogha jnana vichetasaha. So it is their destiny. So in this connection, it is said in the purport of verse number 11 that one verse in Canto 3, chapter 29, verse number 21 of Śrimad Bhagavatam, it is said that the Supreme is present in every living entity. Aham sarveshu bhuteshu bhutatma vasthitah sada. So this verse is misinterpreted. And it is used to prove that Krishna is just an ordinary man. As the Supreme is present as Paramatma within all of us, so as he is also present in Krishna's. And that is why Krishna is an ordinary man. But it is a complete wrong interpretation, absolutely wrong interpretation of this verse, because as I mentioned earlier also, the use of Uttama Purushaha is a strong indication of Bhagavan's being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is not saying anything indirectly. But if, yes, we don't have that Shraddha in our heart, we will not be able to understand. So that is the problem with them. And in this connection, here, our Vaishnava Acharyas like Jiva Goswami and Vishwanatha Chakrabarti Thakura, they interpreted this verse in such a beautiful way. And in conclusion, they said that understanding of the presence of Paramatma in every jiva actually makes one respectful to everyone. That is the essence that we have to take from this verse. Instead of wrongly interpreting to establish that Krishna is an ordinary human being. No, it is not. And we see in this connection, in reference to this verse, we see there is a beautiful verse in Śrimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter 10, verse number 38. It is a part of Damodara Leela, where we see Nalakuvera and Manigriva, the sons of Kubera, they were offering prayers to Lord, to Krishna, the small little Krishna. So it is Smritya Shirastava Nivasa Jagat Praname. So understanding of the presence of Paramatma in every jiva actually makes one respectful to everyone and everything in this creation. So, and such kind of a person is called a Mahatma. And the nature and activities of the Mahatma is described in the next two verses, that is 13 and 14, which we will recite now. So verse number 13. Mahatmanastu mam partha daivim prakritimashritah bhajantyananya manaso gnatva bhutadim avyayam. Synonyms. Mahatmanaha, the great souls. Tu, but. Mam, unto me. Partha, O son of Pratha. Daivim, divine. Prakritim, nature. Ashritaha, having taken shelter of. Bhajanti, render service. Ananya manasaha, without deviation of the mind. Gnatva, knowing. Bhuta, of creation. Adim, the origin. Avyayam, inexhaustible. Translation. O son of Pratha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. The next verse also we will recite together. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantascha dridhavrataha namasyantascha mam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. Synonyms. Satatam, always. Kirtayantaha, chanting. Mam, about me. Yatantaha, fully endeavoring. Cha, also. Dridhavrataha, with determination. Namasyantaha, offering obeisances. Cha, and. Mam, me. Bhaktya, in devotion. Nitya yuktaha, perpetually engaged. Upasate, worship. Translation. Always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me. These great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So we see a Mahatma. The first point we get, that is being aware of the reality of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is always engaged in undeviated transcendental devotional service. Ananya, as we discussed earlier also, this particular word, Ananya, is very, very important. As Bhagavan repeatedly says this in Bhagavad Gītā, in 8.22 he says, Bhaktya labhyas tvananyaya. How he can be attained? He can be attained by Ananya Bhakti. Labhyas Ananya Bhaktya. So by undeviated or unalloyed bhakti, I am attainable, he says. Then in 9.22 also we will see, Bhagavan will say, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana pariyupasate tesham nityami yuktanam yoga kshemam vahamyaham. So then also Ananya again. And in 8.14 also we see Ananya chetah satatam yo mam smarati nityashaha. And here in this verse, we again see in verse number 13 that bhajanti ananya manaso. So this ananya is very, very important. So when we are completely engaged or completely absorbed in the thought of the Lord, and as a result engaged in the activities to please Him, so it is actually Ananya. So this is the first point. And the next point we see, he always glorifies the Supreme Lord. Satatam kirtayanto mam. And he always bows down. Namasyantascha. For he always worships the Supreme Lord. Nitya yukta upasate. And then he is always endeavoring to reach or satisfy the Supreme Lord with great determination. That is, yatantasya drihavrata. And in verse number 13, we see another point, that is, Mahatmanastu mam partha daivim prakritim ashritaha. That is, they take shelter of the divine qualities. And bhajanti ananya manaso. So his mind is always fixed in my thoughts. So we see these Mahatmas, they always pamper one thought in the hearts. And what is that? That is to satisfy or to reach the Supreme Lord with great determination. And they do not waste a single minute in mundane gossip or useless talk, cinema, magazines, etc. So we see in this scripture, that is in Bhagavad Gītā, Bhagavan says about Mama sadharmya magata, mad bhava magata, mad bhavaya upapadyate, in different places. In 4th chapter, 13th chapter here. So in different places he says. Now, Baladeva Vidyabhushana, our great Acharya, he gives the meaning of Madbhava as Mad Sakshatkara, that is direct vision of the Lord. So they endeavor with determination, they endeavor with firm determination for this. That is, and we see it is also, it also means that it is the love for the Lord, or bhava. That is the different stages of bhakti that we discussed in our previous class, from Shraddha to Prema. So bhava is the last but one. So that bhava, so according to our Gaudiya Acharyas, it is said. So it is, that means they are always endeavoring, these Mahatmas are always endeavoring to achieve that love of God. That love of God. And we see that as Bhakti Yoga is easy and blissful process, susukham, in second verse we learned the qualities of this Raja Vidya, this Guhya Raja Vidya, is the most confidential and the highest Vidya, the topmost Vidya. So it is the easy and blissful process for attaining the supreme perfection of life. So people from various social order can actually adopt this and can become a Mahatmya under the guidance of a real Guru. So that is the thing Bhagavan is describing here, as he is mentioning the qualities and the activities of the Mudhas as well as the Mahatmas. So we can easily make the difference. And we see in Bhagavad Gita, there is a whole chapter on this topic, that is people with divine qualities and people with demonic qualities. Daiva Sura Sampada Vibhaga Yoga, that is chapter 16. But here Bhagavan is giving a glimpse to make us understand this subject matter that he is discussing in this chapter, that is this Raja Vidya. To understand this, we need to understand this part also, that is who are the Mahatmas and who are the Mudhas. So who are the believers and who are the non-believers, who are the worshippers and who are the non-worshippers. All these things in a nutshell we must understand to understand the whole subject matter. That is what is Raja Vidya and how we can actually know this. That is how we can acquire this. So as we see, this Vidya is not for everyone. You must have the faith and you must be non-envious to receive this knowledge, so that we have understood by this time. So we see we have to stop here today, because the next part of this section, that is verse number 15 to verse number 19, it will not be possible to discuss in one class. So we will discuss this in our next class. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare